So just recently, I got a bunch of questions from people asking, is there a true threat to Social Security? And the answer is yes. I want to explain what the real threat to Social Security is and give you this warning ahead of time because we are coming up upon this. Now, it has nothing to do with Social Security becoming insolvent in 2033. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the $200 per month boost that multiple lawmakers are wanting to include into a bill. The only problem is they don't have enough support. That's a different threat. The threat that I'm talking about today is actually the debt ceiling. Now, I want to be very clear on this. According to the U.S. Treasury and multiple White House officials, they say we do have some major concerns. And these are concerns that a lot of people thought this is not going to be a problem because we are going to see the U.S. Treasury come out and make sure Social Security recipients are paid first. The problem is they can't do that. The biggest problem right now is the debt ceiling. We learned from President Biden and multiple reports that President Biden and the Big Four from Congress, they met this past week. However, they didn't come away with a new deal. They didn't agree on anything. Basically, they came away with from this meeting with a plan to push forward. Since that meeting, the White House aides and congressional aides have been negotiating and working to find some common ground where they can build a basis to their pretty much negotiation and then branch out from there. This is actually creating a problem because it could take too long. Now, this is why this meeting that was originally scheduled for Friday, a couple days ago, was actually pushed back and will happen sometime later on this week. Now, here is where this turns into an issue. According to White House officials, they say that President Biden cannot just enact the 14th Amendment. You've probably seen articles, you've probably seen different news stations talking about this, where President Biden was going to enact the 14th Amendment in order to just increase the debt ceiling himself. But because of White House aides coming out and saying that even though he has legal standing, by doing this, and multiple senators have said this as well, he's removing Congress from doing their job. And the issue with this is if this is done now, this creates a terrible precedent, and when does it stop? That's the big question. Now, it's because of all these different moving parts that Congress must find a way to reach a deal. And here is where it could actually create more problems. According to multiple White House officials, they say that the Treasury doesn't have the ability to pick and choose which payments are made in the event that the U.S. doesn't have the ability to pay all of their bills. And I've said this before, I actually just said this last week, that if the U.S. Treasury misses one payment, it could be a payment for $1 million, it could also be a payment for $1,500. It doesn't matter. If they miss one payment, that means the U.S. government just defaulted on its debts. One payment, that's it. Here's the reason this is a problem. This means Social Security recipients have a very good chance of missing their payment. They won't get it on time. Even though you may get it 2 days later, 7 days later, maybe 28 days later, I don't know. If your payment is late, if one payment is late, we would default on our debts. Here's a major issue. If we default on our debts, this means millions of Americans will be unable to pay for basic necessities. This includes food, rent, utilities, medicine, hospital visits, gasoline, and so much more. I could seriously go on and on. The biggest problem right now is, what do we do? How do we solve this? Well, some say the only way to solve this issue is to ensure that Social Security is taken care of first. Well, that's not necessarily true. We cannot take care of Social Security because we have this debt ceiling that's pretty much hanging over our heads. Now, President Biden does have a plan, but his plan for Social Security is actually too much for Republicans to just jump on board with, especially a year before the presidential elections. Now, just to give you an idea, what are some of the things in President Biden's plan? Well, he wants to increase payroll taxes which would increase earnings, right? Increase revenue. He wants to change from the CPIW to CPIE. This would be more beneficial to the elderly, and this would increase your payouts, your monthly benefits. He also wants to increase the primary insurance amount by just 1% annually, beginning at age 78 to, I believe, 82. So there's just a few of the changes that he wants to include. But again, by making these changes now doesn't necessarily mean that your Social Security benefits will be guaranteed if we default on our debts. So here's what I can tell you. First off, consider this a warning. I don't know personally if we are going to come up with an agreement to increase the debt ceiling. I honestly think we will. But again, today is May 14th, which happy Mother's Day to any mothers out there. But today's May 14th, which means we have about 17 days until the 1st of June. At that point, we could potentially default on our debts. There's no saying whether it will be June 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, the 16th, 17th, 19th, 24th. It doesn't matter. What we know is the closer we get to a potential default date or the X date, this is going to cause a lot of panic. So, this is the real threat to Social Security. Because guess what? If we default on our debts, and this is what experts are telling us, if we default on our debts, yes, Social Security payments could potentially be delayed. Or, and this is the big thing, maybe they're not delayed, which would be great. But here's the problem. If they're not delayed, that means the U.S. Treasury is taking the money and pretty much targeting Social Security, giving that money to Social Security recipients first, which would be great. But what about the other payments? What about payments to other countries? What about all these other payments we make? SNAP benefits, affordable housing, right? What about payments to the parks? Just keeping our different agencies open and running. What happens then? Do lawmakers that are currently serving, are they thinking, well, man, if I'm not going to get paid, I don't want to be here? Could it happen? Yeah. And then what happens at that point? So even though Social Security might not be impacted because of this debt ceiling crisis, guess what? If we default and this is a prolonged issue, this could bring down the U.S. economy. This could bring down the global economy. The U.S. dollar could completely collapse and crash. Real estate would collapse and crash. Banks would struggle. The American people would stop spending money. It would be an instant recession, potentially a depression. Again, this is a threat. And I don't think a lot of people are taking this seriously. But again, I am. I'm taking this seriously because I know what this could potentially do. Again, keyword is potentially. We don't know for sure if the U.S. would default on its debts. We don't know if we're going to see an increase to the debt ceiling. My guess is we will, because the ramifications of not increasing the debt ceiling would be much greater than if we did. All right? So that's what we know at this time. As always, as I know more, I promise I'll come back on and share all the latest news and updates. Again, thank you guys for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Consider subscribing. I'll see you guys on the next one.